Development throughout the town of Oakville is governed by our zoning bylaws formulated for planning documents such as the Regional Official Plan, the Livable Oakville Plan, and here in Bronte, the Bronte Village Growth Review. But overall planning starts at the provincial level. And with the provincial elections less than 3 weeks away, we have invited all 5 MPP candidates for our riding to Bronte. We want to hear their opinions regarding housing, transparency in the legislative process, and their thoughts on our community. Hello, my name is Terry Shea, and I'm on the board of the BVRA. And I have the pleasure of speaking to those 4 candidates who have agreed to be interviewed. I'm now joined by Bruno Sousa, virtually, and welcome to Bronte, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, BVRA, for having me here today. I'm Bruno Sousa. I'm the Green candidate for Oakville. I'm a father of 2. I've lived here since 1987. I appreciate the opportunity you've taken today to do this meeting with me virtually. I tested positive for COVID, so unfortunately we couldn't meet in person, but I do thank you for creating the opportunity in this space. Thank you so much for that.
You're quite welcome. So let's start with transparency in the legislative process. With all planning direction originating from the province, how would you champion grassroots engagements for more transparency in that process, ensuring a community like ours is heard when developing future growth plans?
Thank you for the question. In fact, one of the easiest ways to deal with this is the way we Greens already deal with our policymaking process. And you're right, it's not great when it's from the top down. And right now, the province mandates regions and municipalities essentially what to do. It used to be worse with the ONB. Now it's a little bit better. But if communities don't have the opportunity to properly plan themselves and put projects forward, then the province shouldn't be making expectations from us that we cannot sustain. And I think Oakville is in that scenario now. We've maxed out our footprint. So when it comes to transparency in the process legislatively, we Greens, for example, create our policy in a grassroots motion, similar to how communities would do it. We would do it through our A's. We would address our councils through meetings with delegations. We would address our regional council with delegations. And that grassroots kind of way to build policy and to build plans is, I think, the best way to do it. Now, when it happens at Queen's Park, we don't get to see that. So one of the easiest ways we can do it, and I'm a tech entrepreneur, so I'm big on this, and we're already doing it in the Green Party, is to have digital apps like on our phones that allow us to very quickly connect to what's in front of members, for example, so that we can provide additional insight and opinion from the community for members to consider. They don't have to look at all of the commentary or all the ratings, but if we create those kind of digital forums where people could look at member bills and things like that are in their second rounds already or about to go into Royal Ascension, that we could say, hey, hold a second. It's great that you guys all feel that way about it. We don't feel that way about it. And at least then there could be a bit more transparency. This could also be huge on cost savings. I mean, I know running a company, if I have cost line items for everything we're doing, we very quickly realize where we're going out of control, right? Sometimes when we do things from the top down, we just say, oh, it's going to cost $10 billion. Great. Did it have to cost $10 billion? Look at what's happening with the highways, for example. Oh, we got a traffic problem. Great. Let's spend $10 billion. That may not be the right way to do it. So yeah, I would propose digital systems to connect everyone, even the equity seeking groups. Everyone would have access, equal access almost, to a system like that, so that we could see what's happening essentially at Queen's Park.
Great, thank you. So how do you ensure the voices of the most vulnerable in our community, such as seniors, so their voices are heard in this process?
Yes, and I think, again, falling back on technology, I think is one of the greatest ways we can do that. I think technology allows us to look at things from the perspective of, how accessible things can become, right? And with groups like seniors, older adults, essentially, that are looking to maybe have a louder voice, maybe due to population they don't have as a larger voice, or whatever the reason might be, they should still have access to systems like that. And if the technology doesn't exist, then we create it for them. As freedom allows us to provide these types of tools, people can interact with them, and then they can have their input at any time. Now, in the case of, for example, older adults, maybe they require more time, more advanced timing on topics, so they're given essentially some leeway on things to consider topics for longer, or maybe have a greater weight to their narrative. Experience says a lot, and over the years, there is something that we can say for that. So I think that's one of the ways we could do it, but equally that would also apply to the younger side of our demographics, like youth that usually also don't have a voice. They could start to interact with platforms like that at a very early age, and if they're capable of reading, then they're capable of perhaps giving input. So I think that's a great thing for that demographic as well.
Great, thank you. So now let's turn to specifically to housing. So how do you balance the need for new development, including affordable housing, and still protect our stable residential neighborhoods?
That's a great question. I think what the Greens have laid out in terms of the plan, and maybe it's one of the reasons why it's been called a masterclass plan, is we have a formula that actually looks at everything, and it looks at through the lens of not only society but also the environment. And what that tells us is that when it comes to housing affordability, the biggest problem is speculation. So we would first deal with that, and the way we're doing it is we're essentially saying every Canadian can have 2 houses, no problem, under the current model. But beyond 2 houses, we're really seeing that as more of a speculative move. You're looking to invest in those properties for the purpose of appreciating their value. And if that's the case, then you're essentially you're turning it into a commodity. It is now just a business transaction. And if that's the case, then you're going to have that additional, percentage in tax that you'd have to pay. And the percentage that we're looking at is about 20%. So that means that at 20%, appreciation would have to be pretty significant for you to be able to make money on the house sale within a year, let's say. So it's a bit impossible, and what would happen is you most likely see appreciation happening, over 5-year periods now. And that would slow down the market significantly right there. It would also tell all the companies that are in it essentially just to own these private residencies for renting that now, it's really not that worthwhile for them when they consider taxation if they're not in it for the long game. And so that's where, our other, factors like we're bringing in rent control and things like that could help with that as well. But I think with housing, that's where we're going to start. We're also going to do other things for housing to help essentially with homeowners, making them more affordable. For example, like retrofit programs for cleaner homes, essentially lower carbon footprint homes. And we're also looking to build more homes. So by creating the supply in the market, we'll also have, a dampening effect. But what we're looking to do at neighborhoods here in Oakville, for example, is gentle zoning changes, and not density changes, zoning changes. So what that means is if you're living in a house that is zoned for low density, we would say, hey, municipalities, let's open up the ability to these dwellings becoming things like duplexes, triplexes, because now we can go from 1 family to 2 or 3 families without changing the skyline of the neighborhood. These homes could still look like regular homes. And I think what that will do is it'll avoid us here in Oakville from having to have buildings everywhere. We don't want buildings. So that's one easy thing we can do. And not everyone has to do it. It could be done in an incentive model where if you want to do it, we provide an incentive for you to go ahead and do it. But beyond that, that would allow us to, have to do, 20-story buildings all over the place. So that's one of the ways we can do it. And I know we have a goal of 350,000 for 2050. All we need to get that is to roughly double the population of every home. So it's not a far stretch to say that, in some cases you could have triplexes, and in others you still have singles, and somewhere in the middle you end up with a doubling effect.
Great, thank you. And green space, is there a point where we say we need to take green space for additional housing?
I don't think so. I think that the argument for green space is a weak one. We've seen, for example, with ROPA 49, I was part of the Stop the Sprawl movement, still am, when I can. But essentially what we saw here in Oakville was, an attempt, maybe due to that provincial demand, to get a plan in place by a deadline because, and what we realized was that, hey, when we brought the RAs together and the environmental organizations together, by the way, Greens were the only ones representing that at the time. I don't believe I saw anybody from the other parties. We realized that, hey, this is that grassroots motion that essentially empowers Greens all the time. It's people-powered change. We're seeing the RAs come together. They did send their delegates. We managed to affect municipal change that then led to regional change that then led to a new version of the plan. And now the new version includes an option for no boundary expansion. So miraculously, there is a way to do it. And it comes down to that gently density building. So what we have to realize is that the pipe dream of everyone owning a massive dwelling with massive amount of property around it is not sustainable if we want to increase our population. If we don't want to increase our population, then sure, maybe we can sustain it. But right now, Canada is calling for ridiculous amounts of growth. If we don't want to, pave over everything that is green and sacred to us here in Canada, then we have to either say no to population growth or at least gentle modifications of zoning, so that we can allow for single dwelling homes to become 2 or 3 family homes. For example, we've already done that. In 2012, we took our home we had over in the new region of Palermo. We didn't even have the house for that long, but we sold it, and we decided to essentially all amalgamate into a multi-generational home here in College Park. And so now, we're not worried about senior care because my parents-in-law live with us. And that helps us greatly with childcare as well. So there's a lot of benefits in living in multi-generational homes. This home technically is a multi-gen home. So there are 2 families living in it on one footprint. We've reduced our overall individual footprint so that we still get the same. In fact, we believe we get more out of life. There's just the time that opens up when you have people around as well. So we believe our quality of life has improved, and that's what we believe can happen in majority of Oakville. Kids don't have to move away. The dream can change slightly. We just have to change our outlook because I think the old outlook, what I learned when I had a single home, I had a lot of property, I had to spend my entire weekends taking care of all that property. And when we've decided to say, hey, let's make it a multi-gen, more people, more hands, less work for everyone, right? Literally the case, literally half the cost, literally everything is easier. And I think Oakville is one of those places that's already in a position to do that kind of growth.
Great, thank you. And finally, what aspects of your platform would most benefit our community, either here in Bronte or Ward 1 overall?
I think a lot of the cost savings that we bring to the area would be things, for example, I mentioned some of the retrofits, so any of the residencies that would be eligible for retrofits, obviously that'd be already a cost savings. But big for us is pushing the electric vehicle narrative. So making it affordable. Instead of having $100, $200 gas tank bills right now, $5 to $10 EV bills, way better, right? And the truth is a lot of I think the people that live in Bronte probably don't even need to go that far most of the time. EVs are probably more aligned to their lifestyles in general. So if we could make it more affordable for families in Bronte to have EVs, for example, that would be one of the things we'd be pushing. So more stations, more accessibility, the $10,000 incentive to buy an electric vehicle. By the way, we also have incentives for other electric vehicles like used vehicles or electric bikes. So we're trying to make that part of moving into this, what we call, climate action or green future transition, what you want to call it, essentially, that's what we want to do. We want to make it easier to move into that, because if everyone can get on board, it will be actually a lot easier to roll it out. Like, it becomes exponentially easier. EVs, for example, right now, if we didn't have the Ford government at the beginning of its 4 years, take away all the stations, take away all the incentives, take away all of that, imagine how many more EVs would have already been on the road. Imagine how many people would be saving money right now versus paying for gas. Imagine how much further along we could have now pushed the agenda versus having to bring it back to where we were in 2018. So I think that that's one of the things we'd be doing for sure. And then other things that may, for example, right now be costs. For example, mental health, any mental health cost, and I know this applies across the board, we're looking to make it part of OHIP. We're also looking to make it 30 days wait for any help regarding mental health, not a year or a year and a half. So those may be also cost saving because I don't know if you have ever had to deal with mental health, but paying for some of these services sometimes is very expensive, and it's hard to get access in some cases as well in terms of just availability. So those are the kind of things we're trying to do to make it easier for Canadians or Ontarians and Oakvillians and Bronte residents specifically to essentially get onto that green future. So
Great.
we hope we can do that.
Great, thank you. And thank you for your time, and we wish you well.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate, again, the opportunity to do this virtually. I hope that I was able to answer all the questions that your residents have. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can feel free to do so at any time.
Great. Thank you again.
I appreciate it. Cheers.